Hi, my name is Sarah Johnson, and I'm a sophomore at South High School. Tonight I'll be introducing you to three of the most famous composers in musical history: Johann Sebastian Bach, Ludwig van Beethoven, and Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. This is being taped in my home, and I'm sitting at the piano where I've been playing since the 3rd grade. Classical music can be divided into 5 periods. First, the Renaissance, which was from 1450 to 1600, Baroque, 1600 to 1750, Classical, 1750 to 1820, Romantic, 1820 to 1900, and then the Modern Era, 1900 to the present. Now, I know most teenagers really aren't into classical music. I can admit it. I love listening to Blink-182, Creed, and DMX just as much as anyone else does, but I don't think you understand how much you can benefit from classical music. First of all, there's the learning part of it. There are many studies that are showing that classical music can help scholastic learning. Secondly, if you look at music in today's society, you have your good music and you have your bad music. Many bands thrive on the themes of sex or murder. Now, it's not exactly the music that's so bad, but it's the words that leave an ever-growing indentation in your mind, which can turn out to be bad. An example of this is the Columbine incident, which happened a year ago. Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris were supporters of Marilyn Manson, and 13 people, plus themselves, ended up dead. Now, classical music, on the other hand, is not scary. It's soothing, and it sends out a really good vibe. With exception to opera, classical music does not depend on words, but lets the music, not the words, speak to the listener. Let's start with Bach. Bach was the beginning man. He started it pretty much off. He lived and composed during the Baroque period. Now, he was born in Eisenach, Germany on March 21st, 1685. An orphan by the time he was 10, he was sent to live with his brother Johann Christoph. He moved between court jobs and appointments at the church. Bach became very interested in the organ, and this became one of his main themes later on in life. He composed for it, and he also worked and fixed them. Bach also became very interested in the church, and most of his music was for the church. In the early 1700s, Bach married his cousin, Maria Barbara Bach. He loved her very, very much. They had 8 children together, but later on in that century, she died. In 1721, though, he found another woman named Anna Magdalena Wilken, whom he married, and they had 13 children together. Near the 1740s, Bach began to lose his eyesight, and near the end of his life, he was nearly blind, and he died of a stroke in 1750. The Baroque period featured elaborate, vividly expressive music. During this period, composers introduced several very important vocal forms, including the cantata, oratorio, and the opera. Another important form was the continuo, an accompaniment played by a bass or a keyboard instrument. The Baroque period was very much about improvisation. Composers such as Bach could just sit down and play, and this is amazing. If you ever meet anyone like this, just watch them. It's amazing to see them do this. Many pieces were unwritten. Bach had so many works that were not written down on paper. Composers knew and used symbols such as Roman numerals to let them know of a key in a piece or certain things that they could do to help the piece out instead of having written notes. The first piece that I'm going to play for you that was written by Bach is his Minuet in G. In the Baroque period, people were about dancing. It was a big part of their culture, and this piece definitely reflects the dancing. Like I said, in 1721, he married Anna, and she was a great singer. I mean, that's what she was about, but she didn't play a keyboard instrument. And this wasn't good because the whole Bach family, brothers and sisters and children, all were musical, and even the disabled ones had musical talent. And so Bach set out to work to compile a book of easy pieces that Anna could play on the clavichord. 1721, Sebastian completed his first set of 24 preludes and fugues, which were to make up the first volume of the Well-Tempered Clavier. Composing these proved that a composer could take a scale of 8 tones and compose in 24 different keys, 12 major and 12 minor. But before this, only 7 keys could be composed in. So now, with equal temperament, you could play well in any key. You could compose a piece in C, but then go right to E and play the same thing, and it was that easy. This idea of 24 keys opened up so many doors into new ideas. The works were so popular that Sebastian wrote that he was prompted to write a second set of 24, which also there it ended the set of the Well-Tempered Clavier. The next piece that I'll play is Prelude No. 1, and this is an ancient church hymn. It was later revised into Ave Maria by Charles Gounod, and it's a really heavenly piece. I think you'll like it. Amadeus Mozart was born on January 27, 1756 in Salzburg, Austria. He lived and composed during the classical period. By the time he was 3, he was showing signs of great musical talent. By the time he was 4, he had learned the whole harpsichord. By the time he was 5, he was composing. This kid could not even touch the ground, and he was already composing. Before he was 14, Mozart composed many works called sonatas for the harpsichord, piano, or the violin. As he grew, he toured around much of Europe with his sister, father, and mother. He married in 1782, but could never provide enough means for his family to live on, and so he died in poverty on December 5, 1791, at the young age of 35. The classical period consisted of light, simple music that audiences could enjoy easily. This style emphasizes balance and contrast among its works. Mozart composed a great variety of works consisting of instrumental music, sonatas, chamber music, symphonies, and piano concertos. He was also in love with opera. Mozart's Don Giovanni and the Magic Flute are some of the greatest operas ever written. The great thing about Mozart is his music is so unpredictable yet inevitable. You never know what's going to come next. But when you hear it, you're thinking, yeah, that's what should have gone on. But you know only a genius like Mozart could have done that. You would have never been able to think of that. The first piece that I'm going to sample for you from Mozart is his Sonata in C. Though they call this his easy sonata, the fact that he plays on mostly all white keys makes it more easy to control muscularly. The runs throughout the piece and the beginning of it resemble an operatic voice, which Mozart loved. This piece was composed in 1788, 3 years before his death. The next piece that I'll play for you is an aria from Mozart's opera Don Giovanni. This aria is called La Ci darem la mano. In this aria, Don Giovanni is singing with a servant girl named Verlina. He is saying, come with me, we'll go to the sun, we'll fly away, we'll have a great time. Unfortunately, this girl is engaged. So in the beginning, she's saying, no, back off. But in the end, he conquers her. He adds her to his list of conquests. And it's a really cute love song, and I think you'll like this one too. Beethoven was born on December 16, 1770. He also lived throughout the classic era, but opened the door into the romantic era. His father was unfortunately a drunk, but he wanted very much for his son to be a prodigy like Mozart. At age 11, he became assistant court accompaniment at the local church. He continued to play for nobility and the courts in Vienna. Some of his works include his 9 symphonies, 5 piano concertos, overtures, 16 string quartets, 35 sonatas, and the opera Fidelio. Beethoven began to lose his hearing in the late 1790s. This tragic handicap did not hinder his composing, though. The amazing thing about Beethoven is, from the time he died in 1827, from the time he lost his hearing to the time he died, he composed so much, and he could hear virtually nothing. He did not need the tones of the piano, though. His genius allowed him to hear it inside his head. He had the harmonies right here, and he didn't need a piano. He could just sit down and write, and he knew what it would sound like. He would write for a whole orchestra without the help of a piano. And so he's just incredible like that, and I don't think I can express how awesome that gift would be to have. However, it did reduce his social life. There was a period for about 3 or 4 years when he confined himself and he secluded himself from the world because he was ashamed of what he had lost. He died on March 26, 1827. The first piece that I'll play for you, written by Beethoven, is his Fantasy Sonata, also known as the Moonlight Sonata. Now, he dedicated this song to the beautiful but already married Countess Giulietta Guicciardi. It expresses his feelings during this time, and he was vexed by the popularity of this work. Surely I've written better, he thought, and he probably did, but this piece is so emotional and has so much feeling that you can't help but love it. When people heard it, they said it sounded like moonlight over a lake, and that's probably how this sonata got its name. This is only some of the Fantasy Sonata, but I think you get the picture. The last piece that I'm going to play for you is one of my personal favorites. I'm sure you've heard of it before, but Beethoven was constantly waging war with the world around him, his landlords, his debtors, his friends, and especially his deafness. But he did compose and perform this piece in 1805, the Fifth Symphony, his celebrated Fifth Symphony, when he could hear virtually nothing. This piece is awesome. It's very common. You've heard it before, I'm sure. And this theme surrounding this song is 3 notes followed by a dramatic fall, which you'll hear in the very beginning of the piece. I'd like to thank you very much for coming to join me. I hope you have a greater appreciation for classical music now. All I can say now is just give classical music a chance. It is so great, and it survived hundreds and hundreds of years, and it can never get boring because there is so much that you can learn from each composer, something that you can learn different each time. Now, the whole sort of theme of my project is why should teens listen to classical music, and how can you benefit from them? And these composers only help let you know what you are hearing. And I guess I'd kind of like to talk about my personal experience with classical music. Classical music has touched me in so many ways. Music is such a big part of my life. I love it. I'm in choir, I play the piano, and classical music is something that I can turn to and just reflect with and listen to, and it touches your heart, and it can have such a deep meaning for you. And I hope that someday you can also have the same pleasure that I have had with my experience with classical music.